to the Bayview Podcast with hosts Andrew Clark and Chris Emery. This is designed to be a discussion on all things life and faith. We hope this serves as a weekly resource and encouragement to you.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bayview Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Clark, joined as always by, I'm going back to it, the regal Chris Emery.
There we go. Rock on.
How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. We're doing really, really good. And as we say every week, like it's kind of a highlight. I know you and I have talked a lot about it. Like it's kind of become one of those things. Like each week, look forward to getting here, breaking things down, whatever the topic, whoever the guest, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
We enjoy it. Appreciate all the feedback we get from a lot of our listeners as well. Super cool to hear back from you that are like, hey, this is my great midweek. I need this. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Had some police officers and state troopers say it's something really good for them as they're out on duty right in the middle of their week. So, yeah, it's cool. So I'm doing good, man.
Good.
Yeah.
And we're joined today by your father.
I am, coming
Dr.
back
Emery.
again.
Yeah.
So a guest back for the second time. And he's here because, well, one, he's here because he's in town, which is perfect, right?
He didn't fly in just for the podcast.
No, we didn't fly him in just for the podcast. No, as you know, if you've been listening the last few weeks, particularly, what we're doing for the summer is we're using our Wednesday podcast as an opportunity to take some dialogue and go deeper into the topic from Sunday morning. And what we're doing right now as a church for the summer is we're in this series called Questions Every Christian Should Be Able to Answer. And as you and I have both already preached, and now Dr. Emery has preached, that the mission behind this is to equip our people to be able to engage in these important conversations.
Yeah.
Because we all have friends or family or neighbors or coworkers or schoolmates that don't believe, and they have questions or they have skepticism or they have these big doubts or even reasons where they believe this is why this isn't true or this isn't real. And so many Christians just seem to be, they lack the confidence and maybe even the knowledge to feel like ready to engage. Does that seem right?
Yeah, and I think it's a good perspective to look at it as the confidence builder. Like I think even in prepping for some of the upcoming messages, it's like it's more about wanting to make sure the person who is engaging these conversations feels confident with what they believe. Not so much the idea of you can go convince someone else,
right?
But it is that thing where if someone's going to engage you, it is the thought of, man, I know why I believe that, or I do believe it, but I can't articulate it. And our hope is that through this series, that's what it is. That you at least feel confident to say, this is why I believe.
Right.
And maybe, I've heard it said, the skeptic will always come up with another question.
Right.
And so we're really not in the business of convincing as much as we are hopefully instilling some confidence in the believer, and maybe for those who are on the fence, they can hear this and understand, and maybe it'll make them lean in a little more. Yeah.
And I think that's important. This isn't a debate preparation. This isn't about persuasion. I think, it was even mentioned Sunday that this still comes down to a belief. It still comes down to a faith. But it is something to be like, hey, but we also have this responsibility, and the church has done a poor job. And when I say the church, the Big C Church, we're all part of that leadership. We can always do better at giving the tools in the toolbox to our people to say, hey, here's how you talk about this. Here's how you talk about our belief. Here's how you talk about the Bible and all the things about it. And that's our heart, is that we're setting you up for great dialogue, great conversation, done in love, done with respect, just as much listening as talking. So all those things coming together. So we came up with 13 questions. Yep. We had 13 weeks, and not that there aren't more questions by any stretch, but we felt like, all right, here's the 13 we want to tackle. This was last week. It was Father's Day. It was just a perfect time. My dad was in town because two of my children are getting married. In fact, one is married now. We had a wedding last weekend. We have another one 2 weekends ago now almost. Yeah. Have another coming this weekend. So two of my kids did that to me and my wife 2 weeks apart. And so it's so awesome. If you go to my eBay page, I have a kidney for sale. If you're looking for a kidney, I do have one out there taking bids. Anyway, it just felt good. It was an opportunity to say, hey, Dad, you want to preach not just on Father's Day, but coming with just a deep wealth of knowledge and wisdom about the Scriptures. And so anyway, this week, welcome back, Dad. Welcome back, Dr. Emery. Good to have you on the podcast. And let's dive in. The topic that you tackled, you let us down, was, are there many paths to God, or is there just one? Is Jesus really the only way? Those are kind of all the questions.
Yeah, I think to kind of build on what you were just saying, I think of the scripture in 1 Peter, in 3:15.
1 Timothy?
Anyway, I've got that. Anyway, it's the scripture that says, always be prepared to give an answer.
1 Peter.
1 Peter. That's 1 Peter, yeah. And 3:15.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say always be prepared to argue.
Yep.
Right.
For the faith. I mean, there's such a thing as apologetics. That's the technical word for arguing for the faith or defending the faith. I don't think we need to prepare people to be apologists. We need to prepare people to have natural conversations, to just in a natural way to explain why they believe what they believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And not put people down, not be preachy, but just explain.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this last week was such a great opportunity to really accomplish that in a big way, because I don't know how you guys feel. It does seem that over the last decade or so, there has been like this, it almost feels like there's been a bit of a spiritual awakening, meaning there's been this broad awareness that, yes, maybe there is something greater out there. Maybe there is something out there. But the pursuit of that curiosity is not necessarily leading people to Jesus. There's all these other paths.
Yeah.
That I think you have had friends, I have friends that have gone down this path of like, well, I'm going to explore Buddhism for a little while, or I'm going to explore Muslim or this or that, in pursuit of whatever their soul is longing for, which leads us to this pluralistic statement that is becoming sadly more common. And as you pointed out on Sunday, Dad, even among Christian evangelical circles, it's the misstatement of, well, all paths lead to God. How do you guys hear people saying that, or what are the different forms that statement has taken in some of your dialogue?
Well, an accusation is that Christians are too narrow-minded,
right,
and that we're being exclusive. And it's the guilt trip. I think the Bible talks about Paul, and I think it's in 2 Corinthians, talks about everything that raises itself up against the knowledge of God. And also, the Bible says that Satan is the author of confusion. So it comes out of confusion, and it comes out of a not wanting to be accountable to anybody greater than ourselves.
Yeah.
And so you raise all these defenses, and people argue about that. And then it also comes about the guilt trip thing of saying, well, if I say Jesus the only way, then my neighbor may be pursuing a different way, and so I'm being very uncharitable toward them, and so on and so forth. And so, as I pointed out in the message Sunday, our Constitution guarantees freedom of religion, no matter what you pursue, and so that's protected. But I think we make a wrong logical jump when we say protection.
Quit hitting the table.
When we say protection, is the same as saying that everything is all these different ways are valid.
All right, so let me play a little let me be that guy then. Like let's say we're having this conversation, and because I think this is where a lot of paths go. I don't think there's a malicious heart behind it. I think a lot of it is this desire for people to feel loved and included. And so I've had it come at me from like, well, but I'm pursuing, I pray to Allah. It's making me a better person. I've got great morals. I treat people with kindness. I'm generous. I'm not out doing a lot of wrong. And so God doesn't care if I call him Allah or Buddha. He knows I'm calling out to a higher power. Doesn't that count? So how do we have the conversation of why that's not accurate?
I think, and again, one of the things that I pointed out Sunday, I think is a really powerful argument, is that we say that, you know, God, what really counts with God is being sincere. Well, we don't believe of that about anything else. Sincerity does not equal validity.
Yeah.
And, you know, because you can be sincerely wrong. You can be sincerely going the wrong direction. And
Well, and sincerity puts it on us. Like if it has to do with my sincerity, well, now somehow I'm somehow the driving force behind it. And that's not, we know that's not how any of this works. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we'll actually be tackling that question of what does it mean to be saved by grace? And we're going to be breaking that down much deeper than maybe a lot of us have.
We also, I do think sincerity is a good word, because we talk a lot about it's a relationship. And I don't know, my wife appreciates when I call her by her name, or when I call her by the name she wants to be called by, and not just flippantly address her or call her something else and be like, well, you know what I mean. Like there's a sincerity in the relationship side of things that is the genuineness of actually knowing that person. And I think with God, it's no different. Like to actually know him and call him by his name, like that is you actually engaging in a deep, genuine relationship versus I'm just going to throw something in the air and see what happens, see what sticks. Like that's not sincere. That's not genuine.
Yeah. And how do any of us feel when someone, especially if it's a long term, calls us by the wrong name and we're too embarrassed to correct them? I had one guy that I don't know how long it went on, and it was at another church, but he called me Pastor Steve forever. And I felt so bad correcting him, but after a while I was like, man, like we're clearly not friends. You don't even know my name.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I mean, God, you know, we talk, you know, we see throughout scriptures calling out and calling the name of Yahweh, calling out to the great I am, calling out to him and using him. You know, in the Old Testament, they had all these gods, but there was a very distinct difference between these gods and the God of Abraham, this Yahweh, this God of the prophets. And so I don't think that God is down with being like, yeah, call me whatever you want, I'll answer. So I think that there is that argument as well. And you said something on Sunday that I appreciate as well, and that is that the accusation is that Christians are very narrow-minded. And the reality is that is spot on. We are very narrow-minded when it comes to the path to salvation because of what we read in John 14:6. So we follow Jesus, we believe in Jesus, we go by his words, and it's him himself saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. So now we have this theological foundation where Jesus is even saying, like, guys, it doesn't happen. You can't take me out of the equation and have it still work.
Yeah.
It has to be through me. Now, how have we seen that even warped a little bit? Because there's some other religions that would not disagree fully with that.
I always look at, like in Galatians, when Paul talks about in Galatians 1, where he says like, whether it's me, or he says we, so the people he's with, angels, or anyone else, like if they're not sharing the true gospel, they're accursed. It's a mess. And so I think, you know, we talk about this, like this is our reminder of like it's the off-brand cereal example, where it's like it tastes the same, it looks the same, but it's not the same. And like so in the end, there's still, I think the word sincerity, genuineness, whatever, I think we still come back to that point of like, even if it sounds right, even if they seem like someone's really important and they're saying something that is not quite it, it's not quite it, it's not right.
Yeah.
And I think when somebody calls you narrow-minded as a Christian, you need to remind them that you're not the one that said that Jesus was the way, the truth. No, he himself said that. He also said he was God. You know, there in the church in Tuscaloosa where I pastored for 22 years, you know, I had a little kid in there that used to always called me God, you know. And so, but nobody else called him God. He called himself God first.
Yeah.
And if you've seen me, you've seen God. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
That's right.
You know, and so you're not arguing with me, you're arguing with him.
Yeah.
So like C.S. Lewis says, you know, he's either who he said he was or he's a liar and he can't be a good man. If he's a liar. Couldn't he be? You say he's just a good man? No, he can't be because he's a liar. If he said, because he said he was God.
Yeah.
when I think through, when we talk about that we're not being narrow-minded, we're just trying to tell you what is truth. We talked a couple weeks ago that what we answered the question, what is the gospel? And within that, we talked about it's a rescue story. We're rescued from our sins. That's why the Bible uses the word we are saved. You are saved. And so I'm thinking through that filter of it'd be like if we were in a burning building and I know the safe exit path. And I'm trying to tell everybody, no, look, just go through that door. That's the only door. That's the only door. Yeah. But they keep wanting to try all these other doors. Am I being narrow-minded, or am I being committed to give them the best help possible?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not being narrow-minded by being like, well, that door's on fire, so I wouldn't use that.
Yeah.
No, I'm just being straight up with you. Yeah. And Christians, we're not being exclusive, we're not being narrow-minded. We're just saying that we follow the teachings of the Bible as a whole from cover to cover. We follow certainly all the teachings of Jesus Christ. And as you said, he himself said, I am the only way. Nobody comes to the Father. Nobody experiences eternity. Nobody finds salvation through any other path through me. And that's not us being exclusive or closed-minded. It's just us saying, listen, we're just trying to tell you, here's the way. This is the way for everything you're looking for. And it's the only way. And because I think also when I hear people calling us closed-minded, or we talk about Jesus being the only way, I mean, there's some other religions that would be like, well, now Jesus is the way, but there's other parts of it with it. Like Mormonism would include other parts, other people. Like Joseph Smith has to be part of that, right? If I remember my studies correctly. Other religions would require Jesus plus works, or Jesus plus levels. Or I don't know, maybe you're in a cult, it's Jesus plus money. I don't know.
Well, even in the early church, first century church, Paul had to correct the Galatians because they drifted into the Jesus and the ceremony of the Old Testament, Jesus and it's not Jesus and and it's also not it's not what I do to gain God's favor. It's not do. The gospel says done. And so I believe that what Christ did on the cross and through his resurrection to pave a way for me to reconnect with God, that's been accomplished. Can't be added to. Can't be added to. And someone said this. People want to argue that God is being very narrow-minded when he doesn't provide more than one way. When in reality, we ought to be thankful that he provides a way.
That's right.
Because he didn't have to.
No, this one way is a result of his deep love and mercy.
Right.
Because originally we were watching that documentary last night on Noah's Ark, and they were talking about the pre-flood world and how perfect it was, and how even science points to a world that was much more lush and green. It was like a worldwide paradise before sin entered the world. And when sin entered the world through Adam and Eve, it didn't just corrupt man. It didn't just destroy our relationship with God. It cursed the world. All of a sudden, the world itself changes, and we're thrown into, we're not just with violence, but animals attacking animals. Now carnivores come into play. Now the earth produces thorns, and the entire sin cursed the entire thing. And if we look at it from the angle, sin completely destroyed everything God worked so hard to make. Which, how many of us in a situation like that, we wash our hands of it? Hey, I gave you a shot, you blew it, I'm out. It's God's deep level of commitment to us that provides a way. So how many more ways you want? He gave you the ultimate way through his son, Jesus Christ. And this is the way. And it's available to everybody. That's his desire. What's written in the Bible? It's his desire that all be saved. And so I think the narrow-mindedness, I mean, like I said, I don't mind being called that. Like, well, if that's how you need to look at it. But we're not being narrow-minded as much as we're just being straight up with you.
Yeah, that's good.
We're being straight up. Like, there's just not another path. And I care about you enough, I love you enough to be like, hey, I'm not going to let you run through the flaming door when I know that this is the exit. That's not narrow-minded. That's love. But, of course, the world doesn't always hear it that way.
Yeah, if it depends on me, if I can climb up some other way, and at one point Jesus said, if you don't come through the door, then you're like a thief or a robber if you want to climb up some other way. The chief sin of man is pride. That's the bottom line from the beginning, is pride, and pride that raises up itself against the knowledge of God. And so you go to, I pastored for 22 years in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where the University of Alabama is. Okay, so, and I can tell you as a fact that there are professors who would expound and would say that they were atheist. Mm. And atheism is not based on not being able to figure things out, or not being, the argument of it's illogical and faith is illogical and all this kind of stuff. Atheism is based upon a something in us that does not want to be accountable to there's someone higher than us. Yeah. That's pride.
Yeah.
So what would we say then? Because obviously the goal of all of this is to help our listeners, the people of our church, just engage in these conversations. So what are some good talking points we could offer up to be like, hey, when you're in this conversation and people are trying to say, listen, it doesn't matter what you call them, all these paths lead to God. I think they all, in fact, I love the example you used on Sunday about the roads in Indianapolis. I've driven those roads and I've driven the circle. And you talked about how the way Indianapolis, Indiana was designed is that there's a circle at the middle of the city, and there's a big statue there. All the main roads lead to the circle. It doesn't matter if you're going east, west, north, south on these main roads, they're going to lead you to the circle. You're eventually going to be there. And that's how we want to view God, because it makes it easier, I guess. It makes it, more, I don't know, maybe we feel like it makes it more open to everybody, but that's not how the scriptures are. That's not what Jesus says. It's not what we know. There's one path. So how do we have that conversation? What are some good talking points we give to our folks?
I always think of the argument of, well, what if I'm just a good person, right? Like, what if I'm just a really good person? I give to charities, and I help old ladies across the street, and I'm just a really, really good person. And I think sometimes the thought of, oh, but I have to believe, or there's this other part of it, it's almost like that feeling of, well, does that discredit me being a good person? And so I think part of the argument is just, or the reminder of, like, it doesn't discredit your good, but there is a reality of, like, is your good just there to make you feel better about yourself, or are you actually doing it for a purpose? Mm-hmm. And then I would argue, coming to faith and understanding Jesus is the only way, like, it might actually, like, redirect and give your good an actual purpose. Not discredit it, not say it's worthless. And so I don't know. I think that's one of them.
Mm-hmm. I like to use this analogy. Lived and pastored for 10 years on the Pacific coast. On the West Coast. A lot of your childhood was spent in San Diego, California. And I use this analogy. If you were to line everybody up on the beach in San Diego, with the intent of swimming to Hawaii, okay? People who are stronger, more athletic, in condition, they might be able to get out there a couple miles, okay? People who are in bad condition physically or ill or so forth, they might just be struggling a few yards offshore. Mm-hmm. And the rest of us are in between. But the fact is, nobody has a chance to swim to Hawaii. Mm-hmm. You have to get on either an airplane or a boat to get to Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And we might get closer to God in what we're pursuing by being good people, even by one of these other paths, or we might, in living a good life, we might get closer to God. But we have no chance of connecting with Him in our own efforts, because it just can't happen.
Yeah.
That's actually a good one. Because reality is, no matter how little or far you swim off the coast, you're technically closer to Hawaii. Mm-hmm. If you make it a couple waves in, you're still closer technically. Yeah. And but it doesn't mean you're ever going to arrive. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
the old saying, a miss is as good as a mile.
So, yeah. Well, I just know that a lot of our folks probably, and especially in our community here, there's just a lot of different thoughts and belief systems, and there's this call to just be much more broad and affirming and inclusive, and all those catchphrases and key words right now. Because, I think at our heart there's this level like, well, we don't want to think of anybody getting left out. I don't want to think of any of my friends or any of my family, going to hell or being apart from God for eternity. And so we actually become contributing to that out of our heart to not see that. And so I think so oftentimes like, well, I don't want to make them feel like they're not going to be there, and maybe I want to help them find it. So let's make it easier. Let's remove some of the bigger hurdles, and we begin to remove like the hurdle of it being just through Jesus Christ. And what we accidentally do is we doom them. We send them to their doom.
Yeah.
When we fail to give them the truth. And that's a dangerous place to be. Jesus had some heavy words for the religious leaders when he preached the 7 woes. And he even, one of those woes was, woes to you, for you shut the kingdoms of heaven in their faces. And when we fail to acknowledge, we fail to stand up for truth, again, we're having these loving conversations. We should be listening. We should be giving space for them to ask questions and express their doubts. By all means, that's all healthy, as long as we are committed to continue through that loving interaction to continually be like, yes, but it's got to be Jesus. It has to be through Jesus. And that's the only way. And that argument stands up against the talk of any other name. No, it's not any other name. One name under heaven by which we must be saved. There's one name. Is it a good I can't just be a good person. You mean good people are going to hell? I've said this a lot. There is going to be a lot of awesome, kind, generous people who did so much good on the earth and touched lives. There's going to be so many great people that are in hell. And on the other side, I think there's going to be some people in heaven. It's going to be like, really?
Yeah.
Like, you're here for real? Like, the thief on the cross, he came in, crashing that party heavy because he did nothing good except die and acknowledge Jesus on his way out. Boom, you're good, because that's the story. And it's what Ephesians 2 says, 8 and 9, God saved you by his grace when you believed. That's it. That's the level of salvation. And you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. And so we begin to see right there, again, Paul laying it out very clearly, trying to battle against some of these arguments. Like, guys, listen, stop trying to make it what it's not. It's profound. It's a miracle. It's deep. It's incredible. It's so simple. It's so simple. Jesus Christ died and kept. I love what you said on Sunday too about all of his promises, and somewhere in there you said something along the lines of, we can believe all the promises he made because he kept the big one. The big one was, I'll come back in 3 days.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, he did. He kept the big one. Like if he had kept all the others and not that one, yeah, meaningless. Yeah. He kept that one. And he kept all the others too, but he kept that one. He came back 3 days later. And so we have this confidence. And I think that's what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to give our people, have confidence in your faith. Have confidence. Does it mean we don't ever have a question or a doubt? No, that doesn't mean that at all. It means that through those moments, we pursue deeper understanding of truth.
Yeah,
we grow in our salvation. We work out our salvation. But man, there's confidence in being like, yeah, it is just Jesus. Yeah. And as you quoted or alluded to on Sunday, Matthew 24, there's no surprise at what we have going on in our world. Of course, Jesus said there's going to be so many false teachers that are coming out there, they're deceiving people. Paul says that they're going to come, they're going to say the things that their itching ears want to hear. So when I hear preachers watering down the gospel, when I hear other preachers trying to make this super easy and accessible, let's not hold the standard as high because that might be difficult. Of course, that sounds really, really good because those are feeding itching ears. It'd be like you have young kids at home. It'd be like you go into Liam and be like, Liam, you know what? I think it is time for you to have cookies whenever you want. Whenever you want to have a cookie, you can have a cookie.
It'd be a mess, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is he going to push back on that?
No.
He's not going to be like, Dad, I've been thinking that I don't know if that's good for my long-term health. Right? No, he's like, yeah. Heck yeah. And that's totally destructive to him because that's what itching ears want to hear. So we have a huge number of people that are like, wow, I don't want to acknowledge my sin. I don't even want to let go of my sin. That's the biggest issue I think that's out there is we have people that know the truth, but they just like their sin too much.
Mm.
So let me find a message that allows my sin to coexist, and yet I still feel the release of my guilt. But at the end of the day, all that may be happening. You may feel really good about your guilt, and you may feel really good about your sin, and you may be able to sleep well at night and sleep like a baby, but at the end of the day, you are not saved because you've not let Jesus come and do his work.
Yeah.
I like what you said about the simplicity of the gospel. People stumble over the simplicity.
Yep.
And I'll never forget, I had a conversation with a childhood friend when I was pastoring, when we lived on the West Coast, and I grew up in Indianapolis, and so I got a call early one morning. They didn't realize the time change between Indianapolis and the West Coast, and he was this childhood friend, lived across the street from me, hadn't talked to for years and years and years, was really having a struggle. He was his only child. His parents had both passed away, and I could tell on the phone that he was inebriated, okay? So I shared the gospel with him, and I'll never forget his response to me after I talked to him about Christ and the way to salvation. He said, "Dick," he said, that just sounds too easy. That just sounds too easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people stumble over that fact that of just trusting Christ. Surely there's something I must do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. You got to trust Christ.
It can't be that easy, right?
Yeah.
I think of the story, the well-known story. I'm sure we've all seen the video clip of Alistair Begg talking about the man on the cross said so.
Yeah.
And the clip is so good because it talks about the thief on the cross getting to the gates of heaven, and there's someone there to greet him and asking why he is here and why he thinks he deserves it, and they're asking him all these man-made questions, right? Like, well, are you familiar with the doctrine of all of this? No. Well, why are you here? Well, the man on the cross said so. But what about this? Do you understand the concepts of Trinity? About I don't know any of that. I just know the man on the cross said I could be here, and he keeps going down this path of all the things that we complicate it with. And Alistair just does a great job of he's saying, no, it is this simple. The man on the cross said I could be here.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. And that's the only way to be here, but that's why we're here. And that doesn't seem, if we look at it through that light, that's not a narrow-minded, exclusive message that's meant to shut people out and hurt feelings and tear things apart. It's a message that's saying, hey, it's here for everyone, and it's so easy. And it becomes a good news.
And again, that what I said earlier about the difference between do or done. All the other religions, it's do.
Yeah. And this one's done.
More work to do.
Christianity says done. If it's preached right, it says done.
Yeah.
And so I like to use the analogy. I've used it in communion services, and when I'm preaching on the crosses, I said to people, I want you to picture the cross of Christ with all of these paid in full receipts all over it, and your name's on one of those receipts. All you got to do is walk up to the cross and claim it.
Yeah.
You got to come to the cross, and then you got to claim it, but it's already there.
Yeah, the work's been done. It's all been paid for, redeemed. Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
So. I just think that's just it's just an important one. I mean, so if you're listening, and maybe this is one of those ones where you've been wrestling. Maybe you think like, well, maybe there are other ways, or maybe my friends that follow these other religions will all end up together. Find confidence in knowing that that there is just one way, because there's only one man that came from God. There is only one man that is God. There was only one man that was the Son of God. There's only one man that lived a perfect life. There's only one man that died on the cross for you, and there's only one man that came back 3 days later, resurrected, and there's only one man. There's only one God that's coming back. There's only one God that can come back, and that's Jesus.
Yeah, and it's our responsibility. We've been talking about being prepared to explain, okay? It's also our responsibility under the power of God in our life, the Holy Spirit, to live in such a way that our life exhibits Christ.
Sure.
I'll never forget the story that's told about Mahatma Gandhi, the great Indian leader. He grew up in South Africa during, way back when, apartheid, even worse than that, And years when he'd moved back, he had a real bad experience with some quote unquote believers, Christians, you know. And so when he'd moved back to India, somebody asked him if he had ever considered Christianity. He said yes. And this was, and I said, well, why did you go to Hinduism instead of Christianity? And he said, well, if your Christians had been more like your Christ, I would be a Christian today. And I thought, wow, you know, we preaching by how we live, by the integrity of our lives and the love and compassion that we show is so important. That's the real, you know, again, something that people say today, and I mentioned the message Sunday is, well, that's your truth, I have my truth. Yeah. You know, you cannot, especially today, you can't win an argument. You can't do that. And you can't even, you really can't even quote Scripture, though I believe there's power in quoting Scripture, because people, they just don't believe it. They just, I mean, there used to be a day in this country when even if you weren't a believer, you had respect for the Bible.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, no,
and not today. So you have to, as Sheldon Banakin says, okay, you have to play the music before they'll hear the words. You have to play the music in your life before they'll hear the words.
Yeah, no, that's super good. And those are all questions actually we're going to be tackling coming up. I'm kind of excited. This coming week, be with us Sunday. This coming week, we're going to be tackling the question of, all right, so why did Jesus have to actually die? Why was that part of this story? And then coming weeks, we're going to talk about the whole idea of being saved only by grace. We're going to talk about relative truth versus absolute truth. We're doing everything we can to really help you feel like, yes, I'm ready, and I feel good enough to go sit and have a good conversation. But never let anything overshadow this. And we've talked about this multiple times. Because we're not debating, you're not trying to persuade anybody, you still need to know your Jesus story. Yeah. Because nothing's more powerful than you telling, here's why I know Jesus is real. Because this is what he's done in my life.
Yeah. Exactly.
And your Jesus story is the story. And there's just nothing that's going to have more impact. Yeah. And so know your Jesus story, without a doubt.
100%.
So... cool.
100%.
Anything last minute to add? Last nuggets of truth?
Sometimes the words we've used today, simplicity, sincerity, genuineness, those all go together. The simplest things are the most sincere things. And it all plays into what is truth.
100%. 100%. So, well, hey, thank you. Well, first of all, Dad, Dr. Emery, thank you for being back with us again today. Thanks for bringing just an awesome word on Sunday. It was super, super awesome, well timed and much needed. So we appreciate that. Listeners, thanks for being with us. Thanks for being here today. We look forward to this each and every week. If you haven't done so, hit subscribe. It's that little, is it a thumbs up on some of the platforms? I don't know. Yeah. Or that's just the like button. You can like us. You can like us, subscribe. I don't know, whatever you want to do. So we just don't want you to miss anything because we're going to be here each and every week. And for today, this is Andrew, it's Chris, and Dr. Emery. Thanks for being with us on the Bayview Podcast, and we will see you next time around.